Hi, my name is JC Gwynne, or the Amistad Man, and welcome to the second edition of my Lake Amistad video report. This week we've been very fortunate as the lows at night have been dropping in the 50s now. So all this week the lake temperatures have been starting in the low 70s and finishing in the high 70s. That means we're that much closer to a true fall bite. Okay. A lot of the patterns, like I said, that I had last week are still kind of holding up this week. The only difference is I'm kind of trying to cut the areas down to where I don't have to cover as much water. As most people know, fall is a time when bass are on the move, and especially in the transition from summer to a true fall pattern, sometimes that can be a little frustrating. So I find myself kind of doing a lot of junk fishing, but I do it in an organized way. I want to have a couple of presentations for the top, the middle, and the bottom. This week, I've still been concentrating on the grass beds, both hydrilla and the podweed in the mornings. Now, because of the amount of wind we had this week, the actual spro frog didn't get a lot of playtime, but the popping frog did. The spro popping frog allowed me to move a lot more water through the grass bed and create a little bit more disturbance distinguishable amongst the waves, and I think that allowed me to get a lot more bites. Also, I noticed that this week they really didn't eat the spook as much as they did last week, so we kind of made an adjustment and started going to a pop-R. Once we did this, it increased the amount of bites we were getting each morning, but unfortunately still hasn't produced the quality fish that I was looking for. Now, I have caught a lot of big fish on a pop-R, and I'm sure if we get it in front of one, he'll be more than happy to eat it. I did alternate the spook all week and did catch a few fish on it, but I did notice that throughout the day, or throughout the morning, it seemed like I would only get 3 or 4 bites on the spook, whereas this could produce up to 10, 11 bites in the first 2-3 hours of the day. Now, as the day progressed, I started kind of going to some of these shorter flats. The reason I target these flats is I don't want to go into a big area like 454 or San Pedro where there's so much water to cover and they can be on either side, in the back or in the mouth. So what I'm trying to do is select flats that are surrounded by deep water and aren't very big. Ones that I can cover efficiently in say 30-45 minutes. By doing this, it allows me to hit 6 or 7 of these a day. And it's easier to find fish, and it seems like, 3 to 4 are producing. So keep that in mind when you're coming up or coming down here to fish. Make sure that you don't want to spend a lot of time trying to look through a lot of water. Kind of section them down or pinch them down. You'll have a lot better luck. I'm still throwing the jerkbait this week. The only difference is instead of staying with the 100 baby bass, which it did account for the most percentage of our fish, there were a couple of days we got around some schoolies and I had some younger kids that just wanted to get their line stretched. So we switched to a 78. This was a little bit closer matched to the hatch, and what it did was get us a lot more bites and they ate a lot better, but unfortunately again it didn't produce any big fish for us. When jerking on these flats, I try to pick these shorter ones with a little bit of hydrilla out in this 14 to even as deep as 16 feet. Now, I thought it was important to kind of show you how I was working the jerkbait. A lot of clients find themselves in a position where instead of really snapping the rod, they just tend to gently pull it. If you don't get that snap to it like this, then you don't have that erratic action I think it takes to get the bite. Now, I really don't have any set cadences. I try to just mimic in my mind what a wounded little baby bass would look like in the water. I do try to make sure I incorporate the pauses because I think they're important, especially with a suspending jerkbait. Now, when I'm snapping it, I try to keep it never the same. Go 1, then 3, then 2, sometimes even up to 4, and I kind of vary the length of my pauses. Here I was lucky and caught a little knothead while I was doing this, so just to kind of show you, these are about the average size fish that you can expect while jerking. Now, on occasion and during certain times of the year, I do have some better fish on these jerkbaits, but most of the time when I'm out jerking, I know I'm going to get pretty decent numbers, and I'll come across fish anywhere from 1.5 pounds up to about 4.5. Another method that we're doing is we're also fishing a small chartreuse model lake crankbait. This has allowed me to cover a lot of water and has got me a lot of bites. Unfortunately, again, I haven't caught any big fish on the crankbait, but it has been a valuable search tool for me to help alleviate some of the water on these smaller flats. Last but not least, the last three things we're going to talk about is we mentioned last week about the buzz frog. Now, as the water temperatures have cooled down quite a bit, the buzz frog is getting a lot more play, especially in today's windy conditions. Now, I haven't caught any big fish on it. The biggest one we caught was 5, but there has been some friends of mine that said they had a little bit better success this week and caught some quality fish on the buzz frog. So I know it's only a matter of time. If I keep chucking it over the right grass beds, I'm going to start experiencing the same quality too. The last two presentations of my day are a Carolina rig and a Texas rig. Now, my Texas rig, I'm Texas rigging, again, the Green Pumpkin Hags Undertaker, and I'm pitching that around scattered podweed, and I'm also using it around the holes in the hydrilla. Now, I haven't been punching a whole lot of grass this week, as the cooler temperatures have allowed me to explore a lot more flats, but there are still some fish to be caught punching grass. You can utilize this by using a reverse Texas rig, and I mentioned it last week and a couple guys had some questions. So I've also done a short clip today that's going to show you how to rig that up. Last but not least is toward the end of my day, I'm focusing a lot on some secondary points in these bigger creeks. I'm looking for these fish to start pushing back with the bait fish. They should gang up on these points. So if you go in an area and it has 5 or 6 points, make sure you hit all of them, because out of those, maybe 3 might produce, but they could produce well. Another thing I'm doing is I'm also taking a 6.5 Hags Tornado and I'm Carolina rigging it. I'm doing that around the ends of those points, but I'm also trying to find any humps that have grass or trees that are topping out in that 15, 18, sometimes even as shallow as 10. Humps are a great experience on Amistad when you can find them and the wind permits you to fish them, because these are areas that fish are going to constantly pull up on to feed throughout the day. So even if you don't catch them at the first part of the day, you definitely kind of want to come back and try it again. There's been a couple times this week where I've hit an area for an hour, didn't catch a fish, came back 2 hours later and caught 6 or 7 off the same. So make sure that you keep checking that, because as the water temperatures start to cool off, the feeding cycles are going to start to increase. Now, as the day progresses later and I pick up that Carolina rig, I try to focus on these points that are really close to deep water. And you can see this one's adjacent to 52 feet. I like these, one, because it limits the amount of area for them to hide in, but 2, I keep expecting some big fish to eventually pull up and start feeding on them. I've also been concentrating on secondary points inside of creeks and coves. Anytime I can find these, I try to move myself out until I get into about that 20 to 25 feet of water. Now, on the end of this point, you can see some trees, some grass, and then it comes up to a definite edge of one of the hydrilla beds. Now, when I find this on a point, I get real excited, because to me, I get the best of both worlds. I get a point, plus I get the edge of a grass bed. Another thing I try to focus on is I try to find humps. Anything that comes out, you know, from 50, 40, all the way on up. This one I particularly like because it's almost bare until it gets to the top. Once it gets to the top, you'll see it has quite a few trees, and again, a little bit of grass that's grown up. But it is fairly small, and it does drop off fairly quickly. Now, a lot of times when I'm attacking these humps with a Carolina rig, I will try it from a couple different sides. You can see this side kind of shot up pretty quick, and as I get to the other side of the hump, you'll see where it actually starts to fall off fairly quickly. I try to attack it from both sides, because it seems like some days when I catch them on coming up one side and the next day they don't bite like that, sometimes I can switch sides, or if I'm not getting bit, I can switch sides, and then I'll start catching them again. Thanks again for checking out my video report. And if you ever have any questions or just want to know a little something, please drop me an email or feel free to give me a call on my cell, area code 830-719-9006. If you drop a question that I get a lot of questions, the same kind of question I get a lot of questions for, I'll be more than happy to put it on the following week's video report, like I did about the reverse Texas rig. And as always, if you're traveling down to the Big Blue or planning a fishing trip to South Texas, please look me up. Let me give you a hand where you can spend your time catching fish instead of finding fish. And as always, with Castaway Guide Service, you're only one cast away from the trip of a lifetime. Thanks for watching.